Welcome to today's explainer. So, have you ever downloaded a brand new app and just thought, wow, how did a small team put together something so incredibly polished in just a few short months? I mean, we're talking fully integrated maps, seamless payments, social sharing, the whole shebang. Well, today we're going to dive straight into the secret weapons developers use to build these complex apps at absolute lightning speed. It really is a fascinating problem. How exactly do developers build complex apps so incredibly fast without starting from scratch every single time? Well, imagine trying to build a modern sports car. But before you can even think about cool things like aerodynamics or the paint job, you have to literally invent the wheel. You'd have to source raw rubber, mine the metal yourself. It'd be a nightmare. Honestly, if developers had to write every single line of code from a blank page, it would take decades to release even a simple app. All right, let's jump right into section 1. What is an SDK? SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and the crucial point here is that it's literally a kit of digital tools. Think of it much like a complete DIY workshop packed into a single downloadable box. When a developer wants to build an app for a specific platform, say a new smartphone or a gaming console, they don't just start empty-handed. They download that platform's SDK, which hooks them up with the exact foundational tools they need to hit the ground running immediately. I really love this next analogy. Think of an SDK like an IKEA furniture box, hopefully with no missing screws, right? When you buy a bookshelf, you don't go out to the forest, chop down a tree, and mill the lumber. No way. You open the box, and you've got all the pre-cut parts, that little hex wrench, and step-by-step instructions. Instead of chopping down a digital tree, developers just use the pre-cut code pieces and tools provided right there in the SDK. It saves a massive amount of time and energy. Moving on to section 2. Inside the developer's toolkit. Let's see what's actually in the box. The very first thing you'll find inside are libraries. If we stick to our IKEA analogy for a second, these are your pre-cut planks of wood. They are massive collections of pre-written, highly optimized code. So if an app needs a complex animation or, say, a super secure login screen, the developer doesn't write it from scratch. They just pull that pre-written code right from the SDK's library. All the heavy lifting is completely done for them. Next up, we have APIs, or Application Programming Interfaces. If the SDK is your physical workshop, the API is essentially the telephone you use to order more supplies or ask another workshop for help. It acts as a bridge or a messenger that allows entirely different software programs to talk to one another securely. For example, it's exactly how your weather app asks the National Weather Server for today's forecast. We're going to circle back to APIs in just a minute. But, of course, no toolkit is complete without blueprints. That's where documentation comes in. This is the highly detailed instruction manual explaining exactly how to use the code, the tools, and the APIs within the kit. Basically, it tells developers exactly how to snap all these incredibly complex digital pieces together safely and effectively. Along with the manual, SDKs almost always provide sample code. This brilliantly acts as a display model for developers to study and learn from. It's kind of like seeing the fully assembled IKEA bookshelf in the showroom before you try to build your own. Developers can look at these pre-built, working example projects to see exactly how the tools are supposed to function in a real-world scenario. Now let's be real. Every builder makes mistakes, and coding is absolutely full of them. That is exactly why SDKs include debugging tools. These are specialized software utilities that act like a magnifying glass and a measuring tape. When an app inevitably crashes or just does something weird, developers use these debugging tools to trace the problem back to the exact line of code. This helps them pinpoint and fix those errors or bugs long before the user ever sees them. And finally, before you release your creation to the world, you really need to test it. Enter emulators. Think about it. Before putting a newly designed car on the actual highway, you test it on a safe, controlled track. Well, that's exactly what an emulator does for software testing. It creates a virtual environment right on the developer's computer that acts perfectly, exactly like a real physical smartphone or tablet. Okay, section 3, SDK vs API. Let's clear up some major confusion here. This is honestly one of the most common points of confusion in the tech world, so let's use a restaurant analogy to break it down simply. The API is just the waiter. The waiter takes your order, runs it back to the kitchen, and brings you your food. They act as the messenger, delivering requests. But the SDK? The SDK is the entire restaurant. It is the kitchen, the ovens, the ingredients, the chefs, the tables, and yes, it even includes the waiters. So the absolutely crucial takeaway to remember here is this. An SDK almost always includes an API, because it obviously needs a way for its tools to communicate. But an API does not include an SDK. APIs are really just one single functional piece of the much larger, comprehensive SDK puzzle. Let's ground this in reality with Section 4, SDKs in the real world. Think about the very last time you tracked a food delivery right to your door on a little map inside an app, or maybe when you securely paid for a rideshare. The developers of that app did absolutely not spend millions of dollars launching their own satellites to invent a mapping system. And they definitely didn't build a global banking infrastructure from scratch. No way. They simply plugged in a location mapping SDK provided by a map service and a payment gateway SDK provided by a financial company. They basically used pre-built toolkits to snap massive, complex features into their apps instantly. All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's wrap this up with Section 5. Recap and quick quiz. Let's review the core takeaways to make sure these building blocks really stick. An SDK is a complete all-in-one developer toolkit. It contains literally everything you need: libraries of pre-written code, detailed documentation, emulators for safe testing, and debugging tools to fix any errors. By using all these pre-cut pieces, an SDK speeds up app creation dramatically. We are talking about turning years of tedious work into just months. In short, they are the ultimate time savers. And yes, they contain the API. Okay, pop quiz time. Based on everything we just broke down, which one contains the other? Does the API contain the SDK, or does the SDK contain the API? Take a brief second. Think back to that restaurant and workshop analogy we used earlier. And the answer is the SDK contains the API. Because the SDK is the complete grand toolbox, the whole workshop. It naturally includes the API messenger inside of it to help all of its various tools communicate with the outside world. If you got that right, you now firmly understand the fundamental building blocks of modern software. Which leaves us with one final really exciting question. Now that you know the secret behind how modern software is built so efficiently, how anyone can just pull pre-built maps, payments, and animations right out of a digital box, what incredible app could you piece together next? With all these powerful pre-built tools right at your fingertips, the barrier to creating something truly amazing has never been lower. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparked some major inspiration for your next big idea.